Getting ready to move after you've sold your home can be one of the most traumatic experiences that you can go through. I had a client once that was so overwhelmed, she almost canceled the entire transaction. When I think about the day that eventually I will need to move, sell my home, move out all the 25 plus years of all my belongings, I break into a cold sweat. However, this does not need to be your story. I want to share with you what I've learned working with home sellers over the last almost 30 years. And hopefully by the end of this video, this will not be your story and it will not be a traumatic experience. Now, I had a client once, his name was Bob. Well, his name wasn't really Bob, but we'll call him Bob. And he had been in his home for a while and he had a lot of stuff. And we started the conversation early. He reached out to me early and I tried to help him. I tried to tell him, this is what you should do way before the house goes on the market. Okay, great. I would walk through the property, give him checklists, and then we put it on the market. And then we got a buyer and we started getting closer to closing. And I tried to help Bob the best I could, either checklist or walking through the property with him or phone calls and checking in on him. But Bob was a stick in the mud. And Bob didn't want to do what Bob didn't want to do. And come closing day, when we show up at the closing, the buyers come for their final walkthrough, Bob wasn't ready to close. In fact, the house was full of stuff, and I am not making this up. It was not ready. He did not have a moving truck, and he wasn't, and the whole transaction was about to implode. Now, we were able to keep the transaction together, find a happy medium, extend the closing, but the bottom line was there was a lot of stress on both sides of the transaction, and it doesn't have to be that way. If you follow some steps I'm going to share with you, it will not be that way. So I like lists, so I put together 5 things that I'm going to share with you. And that's how you're going to manage your stress. And the first thing that I want you to start with is I want you to start planning early. Early. What does that mean? Well, I have a client who recently reached out to me, or not so recently reached out to me. He reached out to me over a year ago and said, Jen, we're thinking about moving to Florida. I said, great, fantastic. What are you doing now? And that's where it started. Way before he was ready to put it on the market, way before a sign went in the ground, we started the conversation. I went over to his house. We walked through the house. He said, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're planning to do. Great. I said, this is what I recommend that you do as well. And that's how it started. And one of the things that he did was starting to declutter. Now, decluttering, purging takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of time. And this is something that you do not want to do when the house goes on the market or 2 weeks before the house goes on the market. This is something that I want you to start early doing. The earlier you start this process, the less you'll have to do when it comes time to closing, because believe me, when that sign goes in the ground, it is going to feel like you're on a freight train that doesn't have any brakes. The time's going to go by fast. And it's a lot less time than people realize to get everything together. The other thing that we had talked about was a timeline. So I talked to the client. I says, hey, when are you thinking about doing this? What is your projected timeline? He says, well, roughly this is when we want to be moved out. And then we worked it backwards. If that was the goal, then we say, okay, average closing time, roughly average marketing time, yada, yada, yada. And we work backwards. And that would be the thing that I would want you to do is you need to put a timeline in place. You need to have some sort, even a loose timeline, but you need to have a timeline and have that written, because that is going to guide you to make sure you stay on track. So start early, declutter, have a timeline. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk to you about is I want you to do your pre-listing prep. What is pre-listing prep? Well, once you have your timeline, you have a general idea of what is on your calendar, how long it's going to take. Now it's time to get busy with your to-do list before it goes on the market. Once you know how much time you have before the house goes on the market. And the first thing I've already mentioned is you want to start decluttering, you want to start purging, you want to start packing. And this is something I talk to my clients a lot about. A lot of people think, well, geez, I'll wait until I have a buyer and then I'll start packing, because what if we don't get a buyer? I'm telling you right now, if you sell your house, if you put your house in this market, Okay, a home that is properly priced is going to sell, and you're going to have it sold probably sooner than you think it's going to sell. And you don't want to be caught scrambling. You want to start packing earlier. You pack all the things that you don't use on a regular basis. You got to move anyways, and it's part of the decluttering process. So start packing, purging. One of the things that you can do is put together a packing kit. And in that packing kit, you're going to have cleaning supplies, packing tape, labels, markers. I think a great idea for packing is to color code, use a color code system. You have a color based on which room in the house. You have all your green boxes go in the kitchen, all your red boxes go in the living room, so on and so forth. And then you can take it a step further. I'm super highly type A organized, and this is what I would do, and you can prioritize. The red box that is a number one box is the first box that gets opened in the living room. Just makes it a heck of a lot easier when you get to your destination on what the heck it is that, that are in those mystery boxes. The other tip I would have, I read this somewhere, I thought this was a very, very good suggestion. Don't use black plastic bags to pack anything. And you say, well, why would I do that? Well, sometimes you have odd shaped items, or you have pillows, or, things that you maybe don't fit into a box. Well, the problem with that is it can be mistaken for trash. And if you have help coming over, the kids come over, your friends come over, to help pack, and somebody's taking trash out to the curb or to the dump, to the transfer station, your stuff may end up going with it accidentally. So don't use trash bags when you're getting ready to pack. The other thing that you may want to consider at this stage is whether you want to use a pod. I think in certain situations, pods are a great idea. If you are in a situation where you have a community that allows a pod, number one, I would check with your HOA. But if you're also in a situation where you have some time to pack and maybe have the ability to put boxes, now you may still hire a moving company for your furniture, but if you have a pod that you can slowly start putting boxes into, that would be a great idea to help declutter. You kind of purge things out of the house, get it ready so it looks better when it goes on the market. People are much more accepting to seeing a small pod in the driveway than having a ton of clutter in the house. But it also allows you to control the situation. Now, everybody's different. I like that idea, to be perfectly honest, especially when it comes to things that I want to make sure don't get jostled in the back of an 18-wheeler, a big truck. You can pack it, and then the pod company comes and they deliver it to your destination. So it's something to consider, because that is something that you can chip away at over a longer period of time. So say your intentions are not to do a pod, you're going to rely solely on a moving company. So the next thing that I would want you to do is to plan the move early. You want to plan that move early. Why? A couple different reasons. Number one, the moving companies get busy, especially depending on what time of year you're planning to move. They get busy. Schedules get busy. Then the rates go up. You want to make sure that you know that you're going to be able to get a truck, number one. Number two, it helps you budget. A lot of folks, and I see this all the time, they say, I'm going to get a moving truck, no problem. And then it comes time to actually move, and it's during the transaction. They really don't have any other option. They call a moving company and they go, oh my bleep. I didn't realize that the moving company was going to cost that much. Moving companies are not inexpensive, and especially if you're moving state to state. And there's nothing worse than being in a time crunch, not being able to do your due diligence and have multiple bids, be able to get, referrals from your trusted advisor from your real estate agent, get a referral from your friends, if somebody else has moved recently, or go on your social media, Facebook and whatnot, your community there, and get a referral, or just go to the Better Business Bureau, and start at that point, start at the Better Business Bureau to research these companies. Moving companies are the most unknown element when you're in this process, in the moving process, because, and I tell this to my clients all the time, even if I give you a referral, you still want to check the reviews, you still want to check the Better Business Bureau. Why? Because that company may be the same company, but the crews change. And one person, your friend may have gotten a great crew, and then the next crew is awful. And that's the unknown that you really want to make sure you have enough time. Do it before you need to, research before you have, before you're in that crunch time, and then you can take a step back and say, I've already got a company picked out and you're ready to go. Now, the one tip that I want to give you on the moving time frame is check with your real estate agent or your closing attorney on the actual move out date, the vacancy date. Now, this is going to differ depending on which state you live in. In Massachusetts, when the deed is recorded, and that's when the property is legally transferred from the seller to the buyer, once that happens, it is expected that the property be vacant. So what does that mean? That means is once that deed is recorded, the property has to be empty. The seller cannot be there. It's not, oh, I can, give you the keys tomorrow, or we're going to sleep here tonight because we're going to be leaving for California tomorrow, or the moving trucks are coming late and the movers are still going to be here. No, the property has to be empty. And what that means for home sellers here is that I advise my clients move out a day or two prior to closing. Now, is that super inconvenient? Yeah, well, selling your house is inconvenient. It is what it is. Selling a house is not for the faint of heart. It is not convenient. It upsets everything in your daily life, but it's temporary. It's absolutely temporary. And I have some folks that will move their stuff out and get an air mattress and sleep on the floor, or they'll get a hotel room. A lot of folks do that. It makes it a little bit easier, or they'll go stay with, friends or family. That will give you the opportunity to be a little bit flexible, because sometimes these moving companies get delayed, number one. Number two, it gives you the opportunity to get in there and do your final walkthrough, do your cleaning. I moved out of my house when I moved into this house. The townhouse that I moved out of, it was pouring rain. And so even though I put towels down and all the things, I still had to do some cleanup. After the movers had moved out, after everybody had cleared out, I needed some time to do a once-over to make the property presentable. So check the timeline to find out if it has to be the day of the closing, or does your state give you, 2 days, 3 days. You want to make sure that coordinated move makes sense so that you don't accidentally book those movers for what you think. And when you think that you need to be out of the house, you want to make sure that it actually is in line with what is customary in your area. Now, coordinating a moving date can be tricky, especially when you have multiple moving pieces. Say, for example, your buyer has a house to sell. Now you have two transactions. You have two sets of buyers, two sets of sellers. You've got a lot of moving parts. What if your buyers, and they're selling the house, their buyers have a delay, and then it daisy chains down? And that can be a little bit complicated, because now that process is delayed, which makes your process delayed. And coordinating, making all that move in a nice, rhythmic flow and like a nice orchestra, everybody working together. You need someone at the helm who knows what the heck they're doing. And what I'm talking about is a great real estate agent, not a crappy real estate agent, not your run-of-the-mill, unprofessional, inexperienced agent, but an experienced agent that has absolutely done this before. Now, I always talk on this channel about interviewing multiple agents. I firmly believe you need to interview at least 3, even if you have, an agent that you've worked with before, even if you have a referral from a friend. Talk to 3 agents, because you just never know. You never know where that bar sits. You might actually talk to somebody that's better than the agent that your friend referred to you. So talk to multiple agents. Now, what if you don't know multiple agents? I can help you with referring one of the agents that I know. I have built a very extensive list, and I'm pretty darn picky. My bar is set pretty high, with the agents that I refer out. After almost 30 years in this business, I'm pretty fed up with the 80% agent. But I'm more than happy to connect you with one of my agents. Doesn't cost you anything. I do get a small referral fee, if you decide to use that agent, but you're no obligation to do so. But if you'd like to be connected to one of those agents, just click the link in the below and I'll get you connected. But having somebody by your side is absolutely crucial. Now, what's the next item, you're probably wondering, on the list? Well, once you have an offer, once you have a buyer, once those contingencies are satisfied, and I'm talking about your home inspection is done, your purchase and sale agreement, depending on the state that you're in, if you have a purchase and sale agreement contingency, mortgage, if there is a mortgage contingency, anything outstanding. Once those are set and done and things are ready to go, check with your agent on this. Then what you're going to do, and this is super important, and this is why I put it on the list, you want to do a change of address and your utilities. Now, you're like, of course, Jen, that's what I would do, and why is it on this? Well, again, from experience, you don't realize when you've got 30 balls in the air and you're trying to figure out where you're going, when you're going to get there, movers, pod, packing, what do we need for packing, job, all these different things. The last thing you're thinking about is a change of address. That's the last thing. And what you don't want is to not do it and then your mail's sitting on the buyer's front steps or your packages get delivered to the buyer. And if you're living close by, that's fine. But what if you move out of state? Not great. So you want to do a change of address. You want to do utilities. Now, utilities like electricity, propane, if you're using it, oil. These are all things that, are a simple phone call, but often are overlooked. Cable, if you have cable boxes, you want to make sure you return those suckers. You don't want to get charged a fee for not returning them. If you have trash service, make sure you cancel the trash service. If you have sprinkler service, turning it on and off, winterizing it, make sure you cancel that service. You make a list. These are the things that if you do this early before you put the house on the market, it's on your checklist. And when you just get down to that part of the checklist, you don't have to think about it. Now, I want to give you a little tip about cancellations, and it has to do with your homeowner's insurance. Now, I talk to my home sellers about this all the time, and they think, when I'm doing my utilities, my electricity and my oil or my propane and my homeowner's insurance. No, don't cancel your homeowner's insurance until after the closing. Why? Because what if the closing is delayed? What if the closing has delayed 2-3 days, a week, 2 weeks? Because something happens with the buyers, or I could give you 100 reasons why a closing might be delayed. And if that closing is delayed and that homeowner's insurance is canceled, what happens if what if you need your homeowner's insurance? What if, God forbid, something happens? Now you have an uninsured property. And canceling a homeowner's insurance is so easy. It is so easy. It's a phone call. A lot of them do require a closing statement showing that you don't own the property anymore, especially if you have a mortgage, an outstanding mortgage on the property. But it's a phone call, and that's it. And now what they'll do is they'll prorate the insurance. And if you have paid in advance on your policy, if the policy is paid in full, you'll get that money back for the remainder of the policy. But don't cancel your homeowner's insurance until the property is out of your name. Please don't do this. Okay, so we're down to the bottom of the list. The last item that I want you to do, right? And this is as soon as the property goes under contract, I want you to start working on this. And that last item is I want you to prepare for the closing date. I want you to prepare for closing day before you think you need to prepare for closing day. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to double check with your listing agent or your closing attorney or your title company, whoever reviewed your purchase contract, to confirm the items that stay with the house. Now, what do I mean by that? You say, I negotiated the offer. I know it stays. It's a good idea to double check. And I'm talking about things like appliances. I'm talking window treatments, okay? Washer, dryer. You want to be very specific. I can tell you a lot of stories about miscommunication. And it's not necessarily the seller's fault. It's not your fault. You've got a lot on your mind. You've got a lot on your mind. You get dealing with a lot. You don't necessarily remember everything. Yes, you remember the big things, but you want to have that conversation. Just quickly confirm. Washer and dryer stays, right? I'm taking washer and dryer, right? Make sure, because the last thing you want is for that buyer to come through in the final walkthrough and say, they're supposed to leave the washer dryer that's not here. Now we need to do a financial compensation to the buyer to make them whole because of the contract that you signed. You just want to make sure that you're on the same page. Now, the next thing I want you to do is I want you to do minor repairs and touch-up paint. So when you're moving out and you have pictures on the wall. You might, when you move your furniture, you might have some scuffs that weren't there. You might, have some things that you accidentally chipped some paint, unintentionally. You took a TV bracket down off the wall and now you've got some holes. I want you to start doing that. And the sooner you do it, the better off you'll be. Now, while you're going through your house and packing, the other thing I want you to do is I want you to start gathering. Get a tote or a box or something to collect all these items. You want to start gathering stuff for the buyer. Manuals, remotes, special instructions. If you have a list of vendors, say you have a regular sprinkler guy or a regular pool guy or a regular furnace guy, whatever you can provide, I want you to also gather all your keys. This is another thing that if you have, extended family that's in the area, or you've had people that have come in to, take care of your cat when you're on vacation or whatnot, any keys that you have, either collect them from people that, keys to your home, or if you have keys to a shed or storage or the bulkhead or whatever, you want to put those all together. And that sounds simple, but again, when you've got all these moving parts in the process, it gets overlooked. It constantly gets overlooked. And the final thing that I want you to do when you're prepping the house after all that is said and done is I want you to go through, I want you to take pictures, detailed pictures of every room, every corner. The reason I want you to do this is for two reasons. Number one, and I actually talked about this in a recent video about, handling the emotional detachment, the struggle that, if you've been in the house for a long period of time, I know when I leave this house, my house, it's not going to be easy. And as much as I am a real estate agent and all the things, and it's a business transaction, it is going to be emotional. So having those pictures, to just remind you and, so you can take those memories with you, is super important. But the other thing is it protects you. And the reason it protects you is that if you get a phone call a week later, 2 weeks later, and the buyers say, hey, you didn't tell us about the hole in the wall in the bottom of the closet. And you say, wait a minute, I didn't put that there. Or the hole that's in the door in one of the bedrooms. I didn't put that there. Well, yes, it was, Mr. Seller. We saw it and you didn't disclose it. So we're going to file a claim against you. We're going to take you to court. And this kind of stuff happens. A lot of times it gets dismissed. It really does. But if you have a picture, you have a timestamp picture of every room, every door, every closet, case closed. Now it's like put to bed super quick and you don't even have the stress of dealing with phone calls. These buyers, they probably wouldn't get anywhere financially, but you still got to deal with it. You still got to deal with the phone calls and you got to deal with all the things, conversations, and it's stressing. You're trying to move in your new house. But if you have a picture, it puts that whole thing to bed easily. So those are the two reasons. Take those pictures, but more importantly, get the memories. Get the memories. Take the memories with you. That I think is important. Now, this is not a complete list, and every situation is going to be a little bit different. Your situation is going to have potentially different dynamics and intricacies, and maybe your transaction has some complications, But if you have this list to get you started, at least you've got something on paper. And then as you go through that process, I do encourage you to do the old brain dump. Get those things down on paper. You have a running list, and then something that's specific to your situation, add it to the list. And then, there's nothing better than crossing things off a list. It feels so satisfying. It gives you momentum. It helps you get through this process. This is a long process. Moving is not for the faint of heart. This is a long process. And if you have that check marks, that cross off, something to give you that sense of accomplishment that you're moving forward, it'll help you get through the process and hopefully not have a story with a traumatic experience tied in. This will be your story that will be a good story.